Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Great Day Houston. September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Nearly 300,000 men in the U.S. are diagnosed with it every year. More than 35,000 will die, making it the second leading cause of cancer death among men. When our first guest got a diagnosis at just 35 years old, it was a shock because he was so young. When the shock wore off, Gabe Canales formed the Blue Cure Foundation and set out to educate men about prevention, early detection, and various treatments. All of those efforts save lives. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, Gabe. You know, I remember going through this ride with you. I met you long before, and you're this vibrant, cool guy. You're still this vibrant, cool guy, and you're about doing business. And then you dropped out of the scene for a little bit, and you called me and said, "I have something to tell you." But you being you, it wasn't just leaving it right there. It was, now I want to do something about it.
Yeah, when I was diagnosed at 35, I had no idea what a prostate was, the function of the prostate, didn't know what prostate cancer was, and the bigger issue was that a lot of my friends in their 20s, 30s, and 40s didn't know about prostate cancer.
Well, I will tell you that a lot of them in their 50s, 60s, and 70s don't either. In fact, you know, I mentioned how many people will be diagnosed this year. How many people don't even know? How many men don't even know?
Here's what I want people to know is that I've lived with it for 14 years. I have lived with prostate cancer for 14 years, so obviously it's not a death sentence, but you have to catch it early. And that is the big message here, is get checked. Men aren't getting checked. Men aren't getting their annual checkups. They're not getting their cancer screenings. And men need to get that checkup. They need to know that there are resources available. So if they don't have insurance, there are resources available here in Houston, Texas. But I would not be sitting here today had I not gotten that inadvertent PSA test. But
what made you get that PSA test at 35?
I had gone over a decade without even getting a checkup. And when I got a checkup and learned that I had high LDL, high blood pressure, that I'd let my body fat percentage creep up.
But you know what? You didn't look like it. That was the deception, right?
No, and that's often a lot of times when we look in the mirror, we think everything looks great, everything looks fine. We see that every single day. But I'd been feeling a little bit sluggish. And when I went to get that checkup, I also learned that I had low testosterone. So when I was referred to a urologist, the urologist confirmed that I had slightly low testosterone, put me on testosterone therapy. But they also did a PSA test. I didn't know what that was. You know, I owned a marketing company. So when they called me about a PSA and they kept talking about PSA,
the public service announcement?
I thought it was a public service announcement that they wanted me to produce. And when he educated me and told me what it was, I called my dad, and my dad said, "Don't worry about it. They're just trying to build the insurance company." I went back, got a PSA, another PSA, the numbers went up more, had a biopsy, and then got the confirmation of prostate cancer. You know, I was fortunate enough that I had the resources to get a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, a fifth opinion. And so I went through that whole process, but I learned that lifestyle played a factor in my diagnosis.
And there were several other things you learned. Number one, I'm going to take it back to what you said, checkup. And let's park right there, because most of us show up when we're in crisis. We don't show up for the checkup. And of course, just like many other things, the earlier you catch something, the easier it is to deal with. But you came on this show with Judge Eric Andel and Tony Masraf, and it was through you that I learned something that I think a lot of people don't realize. All cancers are not the same, okay? We've come around to that line of thinking. But even with the prostate cancer, it's not all the same. All three of you dealt with it in different ways, but the only way to do that was to know exactly what you had and work with your doctors closely on what the treatment and what's palpable for you.
So when you catch it early, when it's confined to the prostate, which is that small walnut-shaped gland that only men have, you have the ability.
My mom was disappointed. She goes, when I told my dad to get his prostate checked, she goes, "Well, what about me? You don't care about me." I go, "Mom, you don't have one." So
men, when it's caught at an early stage, you have the opportunity to go on what's called active surveillance. And you can further the time that you have to do something about it if you also engage in lifestyle changes. And so that's what I have done, and that is one of the things that a man can also do to reduce his risk of getting it in the first place. We know that. We know that there is more and more research that shows that what's good for the heart is good for the prostate. Also, it's good for the brain too, for cognitive decline. So what does that look like? We know that if you move more, if you engage more in strength training and cardiovascular activity, if you eat more plants, if you get plenty of sleep at night, if you manage stress, those basics right there. And if you make those small changes so that they become sustainable, over time you will improve your health.
Yeah, and we know that some prostate cancers can be slow growing.
Yeah. So
by the time they present themselves, you might not have to worry about, aggressive treatment, because by the time they present themselves, you're 120 years old, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing, like you just said, you don't want to give those slow growing ones an opportunity to become faster growing ones.
Yeah, again, we know that lifestyle factors can also slow the progression of the disease, can improve treatment outcomes. So if you're going through radiation treatment, if you're going through hormone therapy, surgery, lifestyle changes can also improve your outcomes while you're going through treatment.
Yeah, we don't want to rely on symptoms. By the time symptoms pop up in most things, it's because it's advanced. But what are some of the things that someone listening today might need to really pay attention to if they've been putting off that checkup?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I want people watching to know that if they don't have insurance, there are resources. Yeah. So number one, the county, whether it's Harris County or Fort Bend County, contact your county health department because they offer screenings year-round. Some are free. Yeah. Okay, you may not get a PSA test, but those other screenings also matter. But if you do need that PSA test, you have federally qualified health centers, FQHCs. In Houston, there are a lot of FQHCs, but let's look at Legacy Community Health. Yeah. You can go there, and on a sliding fee scale, labs are usually pretty pricey, but you might get your labs, your PSA test, your checkup for nothing.
Yeah. Don't let cost stop you from getting
exactly. And also healthcare.gov. Open enrollment starts in November. Yeah. Okay, you can get either free insurance or subsidized insurance. It's important because when you have that, a lot of men who delay getting a screening, it's because they worry about the financial aspect of that.
Yeah. Doctors will always say to you, you don't have to present certain symptoms. Sometimes if you just don't feel right, like you said, you just weren't feeling right, you know what it was, you weren't feeling right. But especially if you have things like numerous prostate infections, you might want to check, right? Enlarged prostate, pain in the bones, difficulty with urination, and those are all those things that oftentimes, especially men, I think, and I'm probably like generalizing, but we'll just put off, and you can make an excuse for.
You don't want it to get to that point. See, when you present symptoms like that, it's usually at a later stage. Yeah. You have to be proactive. Even when you don't feel great, you have to make it a point. Every year get checked. Yeah. Every year get checked. Know what your blood pressure is, your blood cholesterol, your blood sugar, your body fat percent, and your PSA test. Know that lifestyle factors impact each of those numbers negatively or positively.
Yeah, ED is one of those things that say, well, I'm just getting older, so it's nothing. One that gets people's attention, I know a gentleman I knew with this blood in the urine, that got his attention. Yeah. But before, all these other things were also an issue. We kept excusing them. And we can always excuse them and make them be part of some other ailment, right? Mm-hmm. But that should get your attention for sure. You want to start this whole thing about, suck it up, be a man is a killer. Yeah. That whole ideology.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. My dad had a stroke a few months ago. So many of the men in my family have died prematurely because of the machismo factor there. Mm-hmm. I kept telling my dad, you need to go to the doctor. You need to go to the doctor. He had a stroke. It's the same thing with me and my delay of getting a checkup in over a decade. Mm-hmm. You have to do these things. You have to put all that machismo aside and encourage the man in your life to get checked. Yeah. It's a matter of life or death.
Yeah. And the other thing too is you talk about the machismo part, there's also the embarrassment part, right? The ego part. I have a friend, Donna Vallone, who you know as well, who she said growing up, a lot of women in her family disappeared early and no one talked about it because it was embarrassing, right? Because they were talking about the breast. And so finally she asked and she said, why did Aunt so-and-so, why did so-and-so, why did so-and-so? They said, well, Donna, it was breast cancer. Yeah. And she goes, I wanted to know that. So when she went to her doctor, because of the prevalence of it in her family, he said it's probably not if but when with you. And of course, Donna, has said publicly she dealt with breast cancer, but now she could tell her children. So there is sometimes a genetic component. Don't rely on that because sometimes there's not at all. Yeah. But the whole point of there's no part of our body that could kill us that we should be too embarrassed to talk about.
And that's why I do this advocacy. That's why I share these stories, and that's why every day I hear from men from all over the world. Mm-hmm. The more we share, the more open people can, the more men can relate, the more they feel like they can share. And this is life. This is your life. Yeah. There should be no shame when it comes to that. Men need to talk about these issues. They need to talk about prostate health exams. They need to talk about PSA. They need to go get checked every year.
Yeah,
it's
there's
ridiculous.
a man who stopped you yesterday, you said, who just felt like he had no one to talk to, or he had talked to some people, but he wanted to talk more.
He saw I was wearing a Blue Cure t-shirt. He said, and on the back it says, ending prostate cancer. He said, I've got prostate cancer. Mm-hmm. And we ended up talking for an hour at a Starbucks. Wow. You know, he needed someone to talk to. And every single day when I talk to men, they say, I haven't talked to anybody else about this.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
So we have to be more open about these issues.
All right, tell us the more what people can get when they support the Blue Cure Foundation or when they go to your website. What types of things can they get?
Resources, education, information, and encouragement for men to just be proactive. And again, the women have to encourage the men in their lives to go get checked.
Yeah. All right. We mentioned that you were 35 years old. Yeah. Not something that a 35-year-old is thinking about. Yeah. It's something that usually presents itself in older men. In fact, I read a study the other day that surprised me. It said if you live long enough, chances are almost all men will have some form of prostate cancer, whether they know it or not.
Yeah. Well, it's true, but again, 35,000 men will die this year to prostate cancer.
And a lot of it's because of late stage diagnosis, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, you look at the earlier markers. I asked recently a world-renowned urologist on my podcast, Dr. Stacy Loeb from NYU. I said, why is it that I see so much research that a lot of men with prostate cancer have either high LDL or high blood pressure? I said, why aren't those risk factors? She said, I don't know, but it's just all interconnected.
Yeah.
She said, you have to have a healthy body, you know, and it's about reducing the inflammation.
Yeah. Inflammation is the devil for everything.
Yeah.
Gabe,
so what do we say? Eat more plants, move more, sleep better, and stress less.
Yeah. Gabe, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Get checked.
Right. To learn more about Gabe Canales, tips on a healthy lifestyle, or to learn more about prostate cancer and resources available, visit bluecure.org, bluecure.org.